All right. Good afternoon or good evening, I guess, to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And it's really weird to be able to do this intro because it was a whole routine that my colleague, my friend, brother, Jerome Bourgeois would normally, continue in this routine that we have, but just running solo this time. However, I will have, some folks come on and share their thoughts. And I do have someone joining me, today to provide their thoughts and their, memories with Jerome as well. So, I want to welcome them on. They've been on the show before, friend to the show. They are the creator and the lead of the outlet known as JVS. I'd like to welcome Sam Leggett. What's going on, man?
Brandon, what's going on, brother?
What's going
Um,
on?
Thank you for having me here, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, just to hit the ground running, I figure kind of the best way to kind of go about this is just to do just a rundown of those first impressions, those first that first meeting, and meeting Jerome, and then uh, while it is sad to not have him with us, we still want to be able to celebrate those times spent with him. So I love to go over some anecdotes and some hilarious stories that we have had in our interactions with them. And I know obviously outside of the time that me and Jerome have spent being partners on this baby of ours known as Movers and Shakers Unlimited. I know you spent a lot of time with us with them as well. So I'll punt it over to you. Can you talk a bit about what that first meeting was?
Yeah. So before we became JVS as a whole, we used to go and do a lot of screenings. Like we live in the DMV area, so we used to have the GoFobo, the little GoFobo.
Oh
You try
yeah,
to go
oh
and see
yeah.
if you can get tickets. At the time, I wasn't pressed. I wasn't anything, and so I was like, "But I'm a movie lover, right?" And so I'll get the GoFobo thing. I'd get there, and we would see people sitting in line like long period of time. I'll get there the earliest I possibly can. You see people like Nat, you see people like Brandon, and of course, a lot of times with Brandon, you see Jerome. And one time, I was there, I was waiting, I was tired, I had a whole suit on, I was drenched up, and Brandon introduced me to Jerome, and I was like, man, this dude is so cool. Like he's a nerd, but he's not what I would call a toxic nerd. Like somebody that can love Marvel, love Star Wars, love DC, love everything, but also add to it. Like just in conversation, like I was kind of like just off rip. I was kind of like he seems such like a cool dude. And then later on, I had a real conversation with him as we progressed as a whole, and I became like the editor of JVS Media and Productions as it is now. One of our first Comic Con visits, probably his first or second. I think we had met again at a small little diner and whatnot, and just having open conversation. And I was kind of like, man, this dude loves Marvel. And I think the night before he had got the Marvel hat and whatnot, he was like, this is everything. Like he was going so hard into it, and I was like, yo, I really rocks with this dude. I think that moment I was like, here's my number, dude. Hit me up anytime. Anytime you guys are doing a stream, like let me know. Like Brandon thinks that Brandon sold me for movies and shakers, but actually it was both of them, honestly. Like I loved Jerome's heart. Like I love his vigor, his excitement. A lot of times he would hit me up and we would go to Chantilly to go to Airspace Museum. And so me and my good friend Joe, who's like a brother to me, would always try to see these Star Wars movies, and of course the Marvel movies and stuff like that as well. But Star Wars specifically, and Jerome, like on cue, would always text me like, "Yo, you going to see the Star Wars joint? Yo, I'm already in line." I'm like, "All right, bet, I'm already in line." And I was kind of like, man, like he's such a good dude. And I think one of the last messages he sent me was asking me about like how am I doing, like what's going on with you, like let's link up. And I really wish I could have. He was a very good soul. And he also to me was the plug. Like I'll be looking at Jerome and I'm like, yo, Jerome, where are you right now? Like he could be anywhere. He could be literally anywhere. And I think even when I think about like Comic Con as well, like we would go to the press pit. A lot of people don't know if you're press, you can go to the press pit where it's the live stage. And Jerome's an amazing photographer, videographer as well. And so a lot of times I'll kind of have my little rig up, like monopod sitting there. This man have everything. Like he would have all the interview equipment to the side, but he would get that shot. And I respected him for that, and I learned from him from that. And honestly, from both of these men, I learned how to be a better advocate to media from just knowing movers and shakers as a whole between Brandon and Jerome. And I never saw, you know, them bickering or arguing. I never saw it be about, you know, the money or the business. It was a passion thing. They are proficient and professionals at what they do, but it was never toxic. It was always just really a great duo, like the dynamic duo. Best way I can kind of describe it. And but yeah.
Nah, I hear you, man, and thanks for those of you that are joining in on this stream. Jedi Mike, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. And shout out to Sylvia. Sylvia, thank you so much for hopping on from California. Sylvia, who is actually, it's funny you were bringing up the screening stuff. Sylvia was one of the OGs from back then of going to those screens back in DC. She's on so she temporarily moved out to California, but she's making her way back here at home. So what's up, Sylvia? And believe it or not, she knew Jerome before I did. So and it's
Wow.
too bad we don't have her on here now because she we when movers and shakers like got started, it's really funny. She brought up the fact of saying, I know this guy, this gentleman named Jerome, and like she would. When she realized that we had like started Movers and Shakers Unlimited, she had reached out and talked to me. She said, I didn't know you guys had started this whole thing. It's funny. When I met Jerome at the screenings, like I used to say, you know what, he would be a good like pairing with Brandon because I know they into the same type of stuff. Like I need to figure out a way to get them to do some type of project. Like I remember that. So like, thanks again for hopping on, Sylvia. And yes, hey. And hey, Marlene, Comic-Con Mom, aka Comic-Con Mom. What's up, Marlene? Um, but yeah, no, like, and I didn't, I really wasn't in a headspace, honestly, to really kind of like get into it when I was, at JB's funeral. And I'll share it here. Is I mean, we talked about just the general. I kind of got into the general idea of the fact that he was very selfless. Like he would help. If he rocked with you, he would help you out in any way he could.
Right.
And so we actually met at the which is not here in DC any longer. They I believe they're now in San Diego. They've moved the show to San Diego, but we actually met at the GI Film Festival when it was here in DC because he was working in tandem with that show. And so I'll never forget it. And this kind of goes into if you want to get very spiritual. I know we don't talk about a whole bunch of that here on the show, but I'll go that route. Is that's Celia comment on what I was talking about before. But um, with the GI Film Festival, it was such an intense show where it was, I want to say it was like a week and like a couple of days. So like there was always something happening every single day of the show. And back then, a lot of folks that know me can attest to this. Like, I was a solo act. Like I was doing everything myself. I was doing the interviews. I was bringing the equipment myself, and setting up, putting on a tripod. Like I was a one man shop. And don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. It's good to be able to have that skill set But as you know, and what you're learning, and what we're both learning, actually, more and more, is being able to delegate that off, and still enjoy those capacity, those elements of it, but to not feel the need to have to do everything,
Right.
if you don't need to. And so I remember after working, those first couple of days, because they had a guest like every single day that week. And I remember saying, gosh, like, this was like day 5. I was like, gosh, like, I don't know if I'm gonna go to the festival today. Maybe I'll just skip out this day and go the next day. And again, going to that, spiritual, talking spirituality or fate or whatever you want to, however you want to, designate it as. Something in the back of my mind was saying, no, no, you should go. You should go. Like, you may miss out on an opportunity to be able to do something really cool. That was the day that I met Jerome. And
Wow.
so, like, it was, we went, they had an event at a theater over in Old Town, where they were premiering like one of the shows, and they were having some event for the festival. And the guest that they had, as kind of like the marquee guest that day was David Arquette. So David
Mm.
Arquette of like Scream fame, and all that stuff. And he I remember when we were doing when they were setting up the interviews that day, it was a press line. And as many of you know, many of my press folks,
Mm.
whether you're
Mm.
watching
Mm.
it right now here in the chat, or you're watching it after the fact, and Sam, I know you laughing too, how chaotic a press line can get. And that's when it's really awesome to be able to have a whole squad or a team with you versus you doing it solo. But at that time I was. And so uh, with being that one man shop, some things kind of have to fall by the wayside, just by just by virtue of trying to, be very, um, what's the word? I guess not having to lug so much equipment with you. So,
Right.
sometimes some things fall by the wayside, and you kind of have to um, kind of just rock with what you have. And so I
Yeah.
didn't have a light at that time. I was just going to rely on natural lighting in order to do the interview. Those out there, natural lighting, if we don't have, some extra additional light to be able to light the shot, you're using the actual light in the space. And of course, the one day that I decided not to bring a light, the lighting was horrible. And
Oh.
so, because there were multiple people around, and other folks had lights, I was looking around. I was like, okay, someone has to, potentially, let me use a light. And I asked, this person, hey, you mind if, for at once your segment is done, that you can, provide a light. And everyone's kind of being a stickler about that. And eventually, I just kind of like said, whatever, and started the interview. And before the interview started, had this voice come back, hey man, well, hold up. I got a light for you. I'll light the shot for you. And I was like, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for being the only person out here that was willing to actually lend me a light for like a few moments while I did like a few minute interview with the guest here. And so like after that, we were able to discuss various things that we did with media. And he was like, yeah, my name is Jerome, like I work with this festival. I was like, oh yeah, cool, like I've been doing the festival a couple of years too. And we were getting into like the hobbies of like the Marvel stuff and the movies. And I think up to that point he wasn't really aware of like the whole community that exists with the not film festivals, but with the advanced screenings.
Hmm.
And so, in getting into, the topic of the advanced screenings, telling you how long ago this was, um, the movie that I ended up, having extra passes for, and as a way of thanking them for helping me out, I was like, hey man, like I have some extra passes for Days of Future Past. He was like,
Ah.
oh snap, you got Days of Future Past. Okay, bet. Where do I need to meet you at? And so like after that, like that's how the whole advanced screening thing started, of getting him into the advanced screenings. But I mean, within doing the advanced screenings, we would talk about like being just as I said, being our own solo shops, so to speak, of doing kind of our own things and trying to like hustle and be able to do things. And that's at that time how, slowly but surely, I started to incorporate him. This is before Movers and Shakers. I was with a whole other outlet, incorporating, his talents with the camera, um, with various events, whether it was like some fundraisers that I used to go to, or eventually, that started to weave into Awesome Con, and then down the line, that weaved into, Comic Con, and then eventually at that time we were able to kind of put our brains together of saying, you know what, we keep doing all this, stuff for all these other outlets. Man, we need to put our minds together and do something else. And that's how, Movers and
Movers and
Shakers was
Shakers.
born. Um, and it looks like we have another comment on here. Greg, what's up, man? Good to see you. Thanks for hopping on, man. Another mutual friend of Jerome's. I had the pleasure of meeting Greg I want to say earlier this year. Talented dude. When when Jerome and I were covering the Super Bowl way back in February. It seems like ages ago, but
Right.
yeah, man, like it's just it's just funny how, and I not just even with Jerome, I just talk about it in general, on this journey that we call life, how a lot of folks are put in your path that you in at the moment you don't really see the value, you don't understand how impactful that is.
Yeah.
And then after, later down the line, as you guys continue to develop a rapport with each other, you have a better understanding of, oh, I was supposed to be there that day. Like I was supposed
Mm-hmm.
to be that day because I was supposed to meet such and such, or I was supposed to be here in order to have this opportunity. So like things like that is just really, it's really surreal to think about. And I mean, did you have any additional comments before I hop into some of like the anecdotes or what have you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, man. Like, I mean, with the team that I have, so a lot of people don't know I'm originally from North Carolina. And when I moved up here in, was it like 2011, 2012, I don't have a friend to my name, you know what I'm saying? And it was going to these screenings, it was going and seeing these creative like people like Brandon or Najir or Lucas, that they ended up becoming like brothers to me. You know what I'm
Shout out
saying?
Najir.
And it's fascinating, like how I'm not even gonna say it's fate. I think that it helps to progress you as your own mode. Like you would never, if you hadn't met some of these people, you would never be able to achieve some of the things you're achieving right now. And to me, like I am, I'm a believer, you know what I'm saying? And so I do think that a lot of the things that I've seen Jerome do or Brandon do encourages me, gives me like hope, you know what I'm saying, to believe that, oh, okay, even though I don't have this skill set, even though I don't know how to do this, you know what I'm saying, like my homeboy's doing this and he's pushing, like maybe that's just enough. And that encouragement really goes a very long way. And those relationships foundationally, like when we have real foundational relationships, there's no limit to what we can be or do. And I think that from that has been birthed like Big Old Belt Media. From that has been birthed, Movers and Shakers. From that has been built Three Black Geeks. From that's been built, Team JVS. You know what I'm saying? I'm shouting out all these different people, but we are all as a collective brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? Like all the things that are happening. And Jerome was pivotal to that because he's a part of it. Like it's not just his skill set. It's not just how kind he is. It's the willingness to share. It's the willingness to give. And I think that he had a special skill set in that, man, that you could feel his heart just off the first word he said. Is a comfortability about him, and like you said, like if he vibes with you, like he's willing to give you the world. And I feel like that sometimes as well. Irregardless of where the person's at, it's almost as though like, what are we put here for other than to do that? You know what I'm saying? And so all respect, man, and all love for my brothers and sisters in the media business and up here, because I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't for everybody. And Jerome is a part of that.
For
fortunately.
sure, man. And I appreciate you saying that. Like, you don't think you've ever shared that, with me before. So, I do appreciate it. What you said, because I would say even vice versa. There are a lot of times in the stuff that you do that's very inspiring and pushes me to do various things with what's available to us in the media and kind of just jumping off of what you said about just the of being a transplant and coming over here, to DC and developing, those relationships, that family that not by blood, but the family nonetheless that you have, created amongst the our community here, our media community, and I mean, you could attest to this, and anyone else who does content creation can attest to this. Is sometimes like with content creation, being a content creator, it can seem like you are out there by yourself, like
Absolutely.
a lot of times, and like you're just in a space by yourself. And so it really helps, to have those relationships to, keep you going and to be able to lean on when things seem like, man, like just mundane things like, man, my equipment isn't working. Oh man, like
Right.
like I need to be able to get to such and such event. Do you mind if we can divide and conquer on this? I know we're with different places, different outlets, but let's be able to divide and conquer, and we can still eat, so to speak.
Right.
So I guess in that regard, like I definitely second what you said of that component. And one other thing that you were talking about really struck a chord with me is what you were talking about with Jerome when you guys were in the press pit and him having all the equipment. And so that's another thing that came to mind in that time of how that collaboration came together. Is one thing that I very much appreciated is Jerome talking about, or say just in general, Jerome's capacity for detail. He was like
Mhm.
very super detail oriented, and sometimes there'd be times I'm like, dude, come on, like we gotta get this going. But like at the end of the day, still I respected the fact that there was so much care and desire to make sure it was right, like
Right.
it was the way it needed to be. And so that is something that I have continued to take, with me, which, sometimes I'm a very big picture guy. And I think
Mhm.
that's what helped in terms of that collaboration, is that kind of that yin and yang of having that balance there.
Mhm.
But, I would still say, while I had that, that trait, I wouldn't say, I would say that I've definitely taken a lot of that skill set to heart of what you have with that content creation piece of those specific, you know, I'm thinking of it as a sports term, but those intangibles, if you will.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that that really caused us to bond and mesh. And I want to say another thing that really did that was just the drive.
Mm.
A lot of times, going into just that idea of paying your dues as a content creator. Yeah, you talk about it as an actor, in other respects with other, disciplines or careers. You pay your dues, whatever career. Maybe you start off in administrative level, and then you kind of have to work the ladder up to get into management. In entertainment, it's a similar thing. As a composer, maybe you're an intern and then you become, an assistant composer, and
Mhm.
then you finally get your shot to get your own show, and you move up to being the lead composer or the only composer on a given show, or you're a PA, you're a production assistant, and you're working your way up the ladder. It's the
Mhm.
same way even with content creation. You're starting off as someone who, not a lot of, organizations or companies that you desire to be able to have those, rapports and relationships with. Um, they don't have any idea, who you are, and you have to develop those relationships, and you have to develop that trust and that rapport with those shows that, you know, that you hope that will bear fruit, down the
Right.
line, where maybe, the effort um doesn't have to be as insane as it perhaps was when you're first, working with that show.
Right.
Because there have been cases where, because of that trust and that those relationships developed with given shows, you have a second hand where you already have that rapport and that relationship with, that showrunner, with that festival director, with that publicist, and that's invaluable in terms of being able to do those shows and cover those shows year after year.
Yeah.
um and so I guess in that regard, that's going back to that drive piece, is a lot of times going back to what I was talking about, being that solo, that solo guy of trying to do everything. um Oftentimes, every once in a while I would get some help here and there, but I wouldn't always come across, folks. And don't get me wrong, the folks, periodically that would help me out, did an awesome job. But I would say, in terms of that drive of like, hey, like, we need to do this in order to be able to capture this thing, capture this content that we want, they were not willing to go there and have that dedication to do that. And
Right.
give me an example of that. Of what I mean is, um a lot of times at cons, and it's not even at cons, but just at events in general, you don't always have things set up where things are just given to you as a press person to say, okay, we have these press rooms, we have these press tables of these guests, it's going to be on this day. Like, everything is like, set up for you to be able to cover that show. That
Hmm.
is not always the case. Sometimes you're given a badge and you're like, here you go. Have fun. And you just have to kind of like figure it out on your own, of getting that content that you need and that content that you want. So a lot of times at cons, very much so, is, I always call it, you have guerrilla filmmaking, you have guerrilla interviewing, where, like, and I mean, it's not as much of it anymore, man. I know you son, you remember those days. It's not as much of that anymore, but there were those days where you would reach out to the guests. You would go up to where they were having their table. Ask them, hey, do you have like 4 or 5 minutes where I could be able to do this interview? And you would just have to make it work.
Yep.
Sometimes you would do it like when the lines weren't super crazy, or maybe it was during a time where they were able to squeeze like backstage when they didn't have people that they were when they didn't have a panel that they were going
Like a
to,
panel or
or,
something going on.
or
Yeah.
a photo op that they were going to.
Hmm.
And you would have to make it work. And a lot of times, sometimes when I had help every once in a while, they were like, gosh, you have to go through all of this. I'm like, yeah, bro, this
Hmm.
is what we got to do in order to get this. And once that collaboration with Jerome happened, it was none of that. It was just basically, all right, man, what do we need to do? Okay, cool, I'm down. Let's do it. Let's do what
Right.
we got to do so we could do this. So, that was one thing that I would say, that I very much respected and appreciated, in our time of collaborating together, even long before Movers. And that's how that trust and how that bond started to get us to Movers. But
Right.
that was definitely something where I was like, okay, if you want to ride and die with me with this, man, like, I got you. I will ride and die with you for other stuff that we potentially do down the line. So,
Right.
um, but yeah, man, it's I would say those are the things that and I realize that I'm just like skipping ahead to anecdotes, but that's all good. Um, Perhaps you have some that that you wanted to share that come to mind for you.
Yeah. I mean, speaking about, like you said, initially when I started, it wasn't even called JVS. It was called SEL0320. And a lot of people don't know that's literally my initials in something else that I'm not going to say. And we didn't have it branded. Like, initially, I was kind of putting everything up there. I'd put like a tech review, I'd put a game review, I'd put like a trailer reaction, and I used to do a lot of reactions and stuff like that. And so my thought process of being worthy of going to a film festival or going and being worthy to go to a Comic-Con event or even do an interview, I was like, that is so far out, side of my scope. But when it started happening, I was like, oh man, I got to do this. I got to be on it. I got to be on it. But like you said, being a one person show, what are you supposed to do but do anything it takes, And I remember one time in New York Comic-Con, I can't remember what year it was. And I was in a situation where the PR person was like, yeah, we need you to be here right now. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Where is it at the convention? They were like, no, we're like 6 blocks away at this restaurant. My head went, I don't have to change the clothes. I don't have the equipment. And I was like, the only way I can get 6 blocks down in that short amount of time is I'd have to gun it, take the camcorder and set the camcorder up on a mini tripod. And any of you guys know, you don't leave your equipment behind, right? And so I had to go and figure it out, running straight down the thing, and got in there. I was not prepared. I looked terrible, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do the daggone thing. I don't care. I don't care how it looks. I mean, if I'm here to do it. But I realized after that point, I was like, there's no way I can do this without. Like, I need to be able to either one, hone this differently, or I need a team. And that's when I started trusting people. That's when I started realizing that other like-minded people like myself that have a devotion to do this and rally behind me, regardless of what I could pay them or what I could give to them. It was almost as though like, no, I got your back. And I mean, for me, watching you guys between Brandon and Jerome, that's what I saw. It wasn't about what you guys could get for it or get out of it. It was more so like, I got your back, you got my back. And that's one of the things I've loved to witness about you guys' relationship. And I mean, I can say there's other people I can say the exact same with, like, straight up, man, like, look, I have 2 kids. I got 2 kids, a wife, and like a full-time job. And you guys that are working in the media industry, if you're like, a part of a film critics association, or you're doing critic stuff professionally, or if you have your own media outlet, that's its own job. But then you have kids, that's another job. If you have a full-time job, then that's another job. And if I didn't have people like, Lucas, like if Lucas wasn't motivating me and encouraging me to do certain these things, I promise you, no matter how devoted, no matter how passionate, no matter how talented I could be or ever could be, I wouldn't be able to persevere. I had to have somebody pushing me and motivating me. I literally, even before I started this, we just got done doing a review for The Man That Fell to Earth. I didn't have it in me to do it. I was kind of like, I don't know, man. He was like, no, I'm encouraging you. We're going to get it done with this 20-minute amount of time. You're going to go to what you got to go to. I'm going to pray for you. It's going to be all right. You know what I'm saying? And to me, like, as much as like I look at you and Jerome and your relationship, like that's how I feel with me and Lucas. That's how I feel even some other people as well. It's just amazing that is how our reality is kind of become, where we have like-minded people like this that have our backs without any regards to something that they can get from it or out of it. You know what I mean? And it's like the hope that we can get each other to the next plateau together, kind of thing. Because like you said, man, like this is a Game of Thrones out here. From the media standpoint, like there's a lot of times I shout out to Jedi Mike. I'm gonna give Jedi Mike a shout out. Jedi Mike, I'm doing Tribeca right now. And I knew that there was a movie that was coming up. It's called The Family Dinner. It is a very gruesome film. I watched it, I reviewed it, but they wanted to do an interview. I talked to Jedi Mike, and Lucas talked to Jedi Mike, and Nate Jerry talked to Jedi Mike. They were like, dude, what do you want to do? And he was like, man, I want to do interviews. I want to be able to contribute. I want to be able to help. And I hit him up. I was like, dude, well, there's this movie. I had let you look at it. It's at Tribeca, and you can interview the talent. Dude, I gave him such short notice. I was like, look, if you can't, it's fine. But I believe in you that you can do it. And it's not because I didn't say to him, okay, here you go, point and shoot. I've watched this man. A lot of times you don't know, Brandon, and of course, probably Jerome didn't know, but just like Jedi, I look at this man devoted. He's on every single one of my videos commenting, and I just look at the passion that's in his heart. You know what I'm saying? And I was kind of like, well, if this is opportunity, he can do it. We'll see. Irregardless of how it comes out, it's like at least it will put him into a certain direction. And I feel like that's what this is about. And if it's not, if it's not, then what are we really doing it for? Because all the accolades, no matter who or what celebrity I see or get to in the future, that doesn't mean nothing because tomorrow literally is not promised. So it's like the things and relationships and the things that we push people towards to give them another hope for tomorrow or give them a push towards their destiny, so to speak, is really what I think it's all about. Like media in and of itself is not just entertainment for the sake of it. It's to make people feel something. It's to make people see like, oh, this is a different perspective about this. Okay, I love that this person, I connect with them. And so it has to be the same thing behind the scenes. Like it can't just be like you're doing this for a check or you're doing this because you want to meet somebody. Like, no, like let's do this together and you can believe you can do it too. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what a big part of the foundation needs to be with this. And I've seen that. I've seen the benefits of it. I've seen the fruit from it, so to speak, with relationships like people like Jerome, people like Brandon, people like Jedi Mike. And it's just fascinating to be a part of it. I just feel privileged to be a part of the ride. Best way I can kind of put it.
No, I hear you, and I guess kind of jumping off of what you said is not just in the more I do media, it's very much communal. When it's at its best, it is very much communal, and so I've been fortunate in the time of doing not just movers, just doing media stuff in general, of in those travels of meeting some awesome people that to this day I can still call friends, whether I'm doing media stuff or not. And it's just because we were able to bond over certain things, whether it was certain fandoms, whether it was you know um upbringing, like whatever the case may be. um I just that has been something that has been really fascinating, is just the relationships that have been able to thrive and to develop from those, because which was the whole point of if you guys had a chance to check out like the what I call it, the SDCC peeps. I very much meant it in that when I first started going to Comic Con, like I went to Comic Con solo. And don't get me wrong, like Comic Con is a lot of fun. But again, going back to the idea of, media being a communal thing, it's so much more fun when it's a community of you going to, an event versus you going yourself. And so,
Right.
not just with, the teams that you have, it's been helpful even in doing content. There've been quite a few times where I'm thinking that, okay, no one saw this interview, or no one saw this show, and like after the fact someone will say, oh, I noticed you didn't do the show this week, what happened? I'm like, you were
Right.
watching the show, like, for real? Like, oh. So like those are the types of things that kind of that really keep you motivated and keep you going. Because there are going to be those times where you hit a wall and it just feels like you don't really have much left, in terms where you just need to just like decompress, so to speak. And then when you get those, and I'm sure you've had those moments too, of you're thinking, you have to really dig deep and say, okay, why is it that I am providing this content? Yeah, I have a passion for it. Is it something that is, as you do it more and more, of understanding that also that responsibility of what it does on a communal level, of bringing folks together. There've been times where I've been doing not just the interviews that I have, but even, as I said, a lot of the shows, and whether they've been family or friends after the fact, them sharing, that was really helpful. Speaking as them, they'll say, oh, that was really helpful for me to see. That was very inspiring. Like, I'm having a hard time with such and such. And, to see that you're doing X, Y, and Z, a lot of times this will be family members or like close friends, that has inspired me to do this. And so to be
Mm.
able to have that impact of someone seeing, whether they're younger than you or older than you, of being able to see that and to be able to be that inspiration, whether you are planning for it to be that way or not. um how that a lot of times it has been, the run-ins that I've had where they've been saying, this has been helpful for this, or they'll I'll say I'll have a what is it, um accountability type of thing, where they're like, how come this wasn't going on, such and such a week, or did I miss such and such, because I saw that I didn't get a notification for it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that you were, that dedicated to it, which is great. You want your, folks to be dedicated to the content that that you're putting out. But again, going back to what I was saying before, not, a lot of times when you're putting this stuff together, it may not be the case necessarily when you're doing stuff live like we're doing now, but when you are in that editing room and putting a lot of this stuff together, it may not seem like that.
Right.
So yeah,
Completely agree.
yeah.
Completely
So
agree.
so moving onwards, and I know we've been talking about it a bit already, but maybe you had some more. Are there any anecdotes that come to mind that you haven't shared yet, that you recall, in those interactions with Jerome?
Um, I think one, it's weird to say, but even though like now, like I look back and like we be in those advanced screenings and we wait for hours, right? We would we would get there maybe like if the movie started at 7, we would get there at like 4:30 just to make sure we guaranteed a seat, you
Yep.
know. And it was weird. I was just so used to waiting in lines. But there was one time that I think we were looking at The Last Jedi. I think that what it was. It was at the Airbus Museum. And we had got there and like for whatever reason my tickets weren't coming through. And I had invited like maybe 5 other people or whatnot. And I was getting really frustrated. You know what I'm saying? Like I was kind of like, man, I ain't studying this. And Jerome had hit me up. He was like, bro, don't worry. I'm gonna guard this spot. And like he did. Like it wasn't like I know it's a small thing to say, but I've never seen Jerome like frustrated in a situation like that. It's always been like, you know what, if I gotta do it, I'm gonna do it. And if I say I'm gonna do it, I got your back. And like that kind of was like it set a tone for me, like just understanding of kind of the kind of person he was, but also from a frustration standpoint. When I first time I even went and took my wife out on a technical date, it really wasn't. A similar situation that happened. Had a whole bunch of people at a screening, and I was getting frustrated because our tickets weren't working for whatever reason. They were scanning them, it wasn't working. They were trying to say that they were fraudulent. um and I was like, how dare you, what you mean, like I waited, I have this, it's my name on it, and they kind of set my whole entire team to the side. And my wife at the time, she was not my wife, we weren't even dating or anything like that, but she kind of like she took my arm and she kind of did like this. She was like, it's gonna be all right, like it's gonna work out, kind of thing. And there's certain people that can do that to kind of put you in the right headspace that you need to, irregardless of how frustrating or how impossible the situation is. um and I haven't been in
Sorry,
situations with
Sylvia said till 12 noon. That is hilarious. Yeah, I know you a hardcore, Sylvia, but go ahead. Go ahead, continue.
nah, I was just gonna say that I haven't been in a situation, with Jerome where it was kind of like outside of like those kind of situations, but he gave off that kind of vibe that that's what he would do. And that's the kind of people you want around you. That's gonna not just challenge you, but make you realize like it's gonna be okay. You know what I'm saying? And I find that in even some of the best relationships I have, the people that expect more out of me, one, or two, like settle me back down to reassure me. And I'm not like a pushover. Like I can be completely independent. Like I could easily watch and binge all the Stranger Things season 4 all over again right now if I had the opportunity to do that. So I can be an introvert and extrovert, but it's certain people that can pull you out of your comfort zone and at the same time, there's people that can like raise you up and encourage you. And I really do feel like that was him in a lot of respects, based on from what I could tell. And you could tell me different, Brandon, but that's the kind of impression he left for me in the small amount of times that I could see him in situations like that.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, just in general, as I said, I mentioned the examples of going to cons, but I mean in the same regard, if you're going to festivals, festivals are don't sleep on festivals. Festivals are huge endeavors too, and oftentimes, just like you were talking about, Sam, you have a film in one part of wherever the venue is, and I'm not talking about a building. Sometimes it's a whole, like, downtown area.
Yep.
If you're lucky, there's transportation available with shuttles, but that's not always the case.
Oh.
Sometimes you on your own.
Mhm.
And so, even in regards of that, of like, if we have an interview in one place and then having an interview halfway across town in another place, it was just a situation of like, okay, we got to make this work. Like, we got
Right.
these are the things that that we have scheduled today, and I mean, we will find ways to kind of circumvent that stress of being able to get to one spot of another. Like, we would have calendars that we would create and break it down that way and try to map out how the entire day would go, especially as we started to do movers, and we obviously we had those calendars that we shared a part of that same outlet. So um but still, like, that's not everybody, guys. Like, and
Mhm.
then that's
Mhm.
you're not gonna come across someone who has that type of drive and is that committed that way,
Mhm.
and to have that kindred spirit that is committed and driven that way. Because I'll be honest, there were a lot of times where prior to having the collaboration with Jerome and doing movers, where I was like, man, am I just like, is it just that I'm just that driven, and is that sometimes, like, I'm maybe I'm working too hard, or I'm doing, maybe that's doing too much of having the drive and the you know um not having the fear of having to walk up to a guest and say, "Hey, do you have some time to do this?" Because, like, and you can attest to this, Sam. There's some folks that don't have the drive to do that. Like, they're like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't." And I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place. Don't get me wrong about that. There very
Mhm.
much is. But if it's a situation where it is a space where that wouldn't be unusual. If you're in a with some shows, they'll have a press lounge, and you have
Mhm.
guests that are in the press lounge. Using that opportunity to be able to walk up to the guests and speak to the guests of what it is that what it is that you're interested in having, what you're interested in terms of the project that they're doing,
Right.
to be able to interview them. So that was again, and I mean, I've harped on it already, is something that still, to even to this day, and I'm like, wow, like, to be able to come across someone who it was a kindred spirit in that way, to be able to ride with you and do that, have the fortitude of mind to you know go along and be able to not have, and it's funny, like, it was talked about in the speeches of, he was the type of person where, like, he would go right up to a guest and say, hey, like, hey, I love your work and such, you mind if I take a quick picture or do X, Y, and Z. So
Mhm.
and it looks like we have our next guest up. So I want to give him an opportunity to come on. Another friend to the show. I want to welcome he provides his talents to much of the Arrowverse, composer Blake Neely. Let me bring him on. See, hold on. What's up, Blake? How you doing, man? What's up? What's up? Blake, you came in at a good time. One a couple of things that we have been talking about thus far, with Jerome is, talking about, anecdotes and impressions. And, since you're just hopping on, it's always interesting to hear, from another perspective. I mean, obviously I had my perspective, but, perhaps you did, in terms of those first impressions. So, I wanted to give you that space and that time to talk about that, that first meeting, those first impressions of Jerome. And thanks for joining us, by the way, also.
He's muted, I think.
Oh, hold on. Hold on 1 second. I can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Continue. Yes.
I still can't hear him for some reason.
Okay. Hold on 1 sec. All right. Hold on 1 sec, Blake. Get you on back here. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
How about now?
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah, better. Go ahead. Go for it.
I was gonna say the first time I met Jerome was 2015 Comic-Con. It's where I always saw him, except for the couple times you guys came over to my studio. And he was behind. What's that?
I was just laughing, man, but go ahead.
Yeah, he was behind the camera, and you were asking me some questions about shows I was working on. And then the interview lasted, I don't know, 10 minutes. And then we spent the next 2 hours drinking.
Indeed.
And then it became the annual thing. That was our annual thing.
It was. And, speaking of that, could you, perhaps, I mean, since you just hopped on here now, talking about those anecdotes. So, like, since you first came on, I want to punt it over to you, and then Sam, I'll hand it off, to you on, perhaps some other anecdotes. But are there any anecdotes, even outside of the initial, meeting that we had of memories that you had, and it may even be of, those times, as you said, of visiting you at your studio.
Yeah. Hi, Sam. By the way.
Hey, how you doing?
I mean, I didn't know him well. I just knew I liked him. He just had this amazing smile. There's nothing like a Jerome smile, and his laughter, and also his intense knowledge of film and TV. When you guys were here and we were sitting at my bar, he was just like quoting lines from movies, and like, how do you remember that? Like, such crazy, obtuse lines and scenes. So he really, really learned what he was passionate about.
Indeed. And Sam, before I close off and talk about any additional anecdotes that come to mind for me, or are there any last ones that that come to mind for you, in the time that you've been on the sideline, observing?
I'm gonna date myself, but I used to be a long time ago a manager at Blockbuster. And at the time when I was working at Blockbuster, we didn't have like the big screen TV or anything like that. So we didn't have like trailers to let people know what the movies were about or whatnot.
Right.
That came later on. So one of your jobs were to explain and elaborate, on what the movie would be. Like, you have like a few seconds, like, is this movie any good? What do you think about this movie? And so I honed my skill set as a critic later on by doing that. Like, I was like, whatever the movie was, but I prided myself on, like, whatever the movie come out, brand new or old, whoever asked me that question, I'd be to have it. And it's very few people that I know, that know almost all different movies, TV shows, music, games. And Jerome was one of those people. Like, he was on that level, and dare I say, probably higher than I was, because there's certain things he would know about, like Marvel specifically, that I'll be like, let me read that up, let me Google that. Wait, what? Okay. So yeah, he had a plethora of understanding and knowledge, and I related to it, but I was like, man, I need to brush up on what I know, So yeah, that was one thing I wanted to add.
Cool beans. And
yeah, we did.
Go ahead.
We did get a little spat once when he was talking about Marvel. I said, "Man, I'm a DC guy. All the stuff I do is DC," and he's like, "No."
No, definitely. I guess so I guess I'm trying to think. Yeah, I do actually have some superhero stories, so some DC and Marvel stuff. And I mean, a lot of people can get a taste of it, with this week in review, of us talking about, various superhero stuff. But I do remember thinking back of, like, I want to say, and this is funny too, because this came up at JB's funeral, and it was just the how intense he was about I Pick theaters. And I know this doesn't really. I remember, because when we were doing the show, it was something that we were keen on having as an episode. And so, after kind of like doing a litmus of, like, the theater itself, anyone who knows Jerome didn't look back after that, and, like, pretty much every major blockbuster movie that he saw at that time, he would see at I Pick theaters. And so, and talking about, like, Avengers stuff, and talking, just as you were saying, Sam, commenting on various characters, and having arguments of, like, this character would beat this character, or
Right.
like, what are you talking about, he has the infinity gauntlet, there's no possible way he could win. We would really get into it, but it's funny. I appreciated it because, just as you said, he was very knowledgeable. So, like, I appreciated it, being able to dual mind, so to speak,
Right.
of, the various things, because not everybody could hang. And it's very it's fun when you have someone who can hang like that. And a lot of times with with family, or with some friends, not those that are completely entwined to what we do, Sam, they're like, huh, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
what are you talking about with this long shot here, or this montage, or what are you talking about? Like, it's just, like, goes over their head.
Right.
So, like, it was great to be able to have someone to tango, so to speak, on an intellectual level with that type of thing. And it looks like we do have a couple of comments. So, Comic-Con Mom, what's up? I'll put it back up here. So, I met Jerome at a screening. Don't remember the movie, but he was wearing a hat that reminded me of Raiders of the Lost. Oh yeah. I do remember that hat. And let me see, Greg. I pick for every blockbuster, absolutely. So yeah. But yeah, I guess those are the things that stick in my mind, is that obsession with I Pick theaters. I even remember, just as you were saying, those times where, even unbeknownst to me, like, of planning logistic wise of other major blockbusters, when it was at IMAX theaters. So, like, there would be a lot of times where, like, after the fact, I guess you guys had already, like, planned it or what have you. He's like, oh yeah, are you going to Infinity War? Like, we're going to IMAX, and it's going to be on such and such a date, and I already had the tickets, and blah 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 blah. Like, it was already, like, set.
Well,
And
the
like,
other thing I remember was funny was because when the two of you walk in, you're the motor mouth. You're the one just talking. And for the first, I don't know, hour that I knew him back then, 2015, when I first met, I didn't think he talked. And then he waits, and then he drops this bomb, and you're like, oh my God, not only do you talk, everything coming out of your mouth is fascinating. You know what I mean? And that's
absolutely.
a real skill. That's a real skill, to just hold your tongue until you've got something to actually talk about.
No, indeed. So, I mean, we could be, obviously, we could be here, all day, talking about, Jerome, I feel. Or are there any, like, closing remarks, that you guys have? And then after that, I'll close off with the video. Whoever like to go first.
I'm just really, really sorry for what you're going through, my friend. Well, awesome.
Yeah. Sam?
I'm gonna ask a warming question.
Sure,
did Jerome get to see Top Gun Maverick? Do you know?
Yes,
Yes,
he did. He did. Yes, that was the last movie he saw. Yeah.
So
Because I remember
the
he was raving about it. And he's like, dude, you got to see this movie. Like, you have to check it out. And I was a little like hesitant. I was like, okay. And he's like, no, seriously, like you got to check it out. So yeah, that I want to say
yeah.
that was the only thing that I'm bummed that didn't get an opportunity to get to was a Stranger Things. Because we were talking about that big time, the first half of this new season, and The Boys. He never got around to seeing The Boys, so
Yeah,
that's only regret of him not being able to check out. So
yeah. The reason why I bring up Top Gun Maverick is that this movie takes place 30 years later.
yeah,
It is all practical and it is cinema at its finest. Like it is one of the best movies this year. And I'm not just plugging the movie, but I bring it up because that is one of those movies, some movies that you would be willing to see again in an IMAX or EdPack or anything else. And that would be an experience that I would love to be like, yo, Jerome, Brandon, Eris, Chris, Lucas, let's go and see it again. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I think that he is the type of person that I'd want next to me with some 3D glasses or whatever, and just enjoying the moment, the atmosphere. That's what he gave.
yeah,
And I think that for me, that is sad, that, I'm not going to be able to do that with my friend, and I would thoroughly miss him. And I am sorry and am saddened. And my prayers go out to you, Brandon, to his family, friends. And I mean, he was a beautiful soul, man. I don't even know the way to kind of put it. And the media industry in and of itself it took a L, but his mark on media and his mark on everything that surrounded it, to me, will never be forgotten. It's almost unprecedented, the amount of things that he dabbled in and he touched and the people that he touched, that I really still can't really comprehend. But I think it is to be celebrated. I think it is to be acknowledged. And again, I thank you for having me here to even speak on his behalf, because it was an honor meeting him and being a part of his life in the period of time that I met him.
for sure. And I want to thank you guys for hopping on to be able to share your stories or and your thoughts. And shout out to Sister Joelle and Mom Gina, once again. And on a positive note, I want to be able to share this video to close our conversations. So give me one moment. See. All right. Friends and family know that they have my heartfelt condolences. I will never forget how nice he was to me when we first met at a San Diego Comic-Con. I just also love how passionate he was with pop culture when it comes to many topics of that category. I also enjoy mightily his Instagram photos of his trips and rare cars, which were amazing to see. So thank you for sharing that, Jerome. I'm just gonna miss you a lot, buddy. Can't believe this happened. Until we meet again. Rest in peace, my friend.
Wanted to send my condolences to the Bourgeois family for Jerome's sudden passing. Jerome was a great guy that I had the fortune of knowing. He was just incredibly knowledgeable and just super warm and inviting. I always had fun being around him. He was definitely very dedicated to his craft and just a really smart guy. And it's a shame that he's passed like this, but I'm just really fortunate that I had the chance to meet him.
My name is John Kelly, and I wish very much that I was not delivering these words today. I was, as everyone, was incredibly shocked and sad to see this news about Jerome. I've had the opportunity to work with him for many years in my capacity as the publicist for the Virginia Film Festival, where he and Brandon would come down and do various interviews over many years. Jerome was incredibly consistent in the way that he presented himself. Fun, friendly, inquisitive, open. I enjoyed every interaction with him. And a couple of years back, he and Brandon came down to interview me in my office about my music. And once again, I was really touched by his interest that he showed, and his professionalism, and just for being a person that was incredibly fun and good to be around. You felt better for having seen him. And I'm sure that's the way all of you feel who are talking about him today. And I send my most heartfelt condolences to everyone who is missing him now and will continue to miss him. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
My name is Charles-Henri Avalanche, and I am a composer based in Los Angeles. I've had the pleasure to meet Jerome a few times over the past few years at various events like Comic-Con, and also when he and his good friend Brandon made me the honor of coming over here my studio and do an interview. We spent some great time together, and for the few times that we did spend time together, I thought he was a very, very kind person, very professional and very passionate about what he was doing. Like everybody else, it just came as a shock for me to hear of his passing. It's very, very sad. And right now my thoughts are going toward his friends and families who probably, just like everyone else, are in shock and mourning the sudden passing of Jerome, who was such a kind man. May his soul rest in peace.